Hello, my name is Grant Kramer, and I am a professor emeritus at the University of Nevada, Reno. Today is November 2nd, and it's at the end of Season 2. So let's review how my vines grew over the course of the season. My Backyard Vineyard, Season 2, Episode 11, Grapevine Growth During the Season. Well, we started off the season with 4 different vines that we started to look at in terms of their different pruning strategies. So let's review how they grew through the season and how they ended up at the end of the season. Let's start with Grape Vine R6-4, which is a location in the vineyard. If we look at February 12th, this was our most vigorous vine. At February 12th, this is the growth that was on the vine at the end of the season, where we had already pruned it off at the top and 2 shoots had formed. So this season, we then pruned those 2 shoots to make for 4 spurs. And you can see the vigorous growth that occurred in this vine on May 2nd. This is the beginning of our goblet shape, and this was an advanced growth compared to most of the vines in the vineyard, which did not reach this developmental stage. You can also see that the trunk that is forming is a bit thicker, as this vine is a more vigorous vine. And by November 2nd on the right here, this vine had to be pruned back multiple times at the ends in order to keep it from growing into other vines. So it had a vigorous growth. And as a result, laterals formed at the end of the vines, which will all be pruned off next year when we again pruned those 4 shoots, those 4 spurs, into spurs again, resulting in 8 spurs for next year. So we'll revisit that next year. Our next vine, which is a little bit less vigorous than the previous vine, but a little bit more vigorous than the next vine, is Grape Vine R31. And we can see at the left-hand side on March 17th, there had already been bud break, and the vine had grown up as a single shoot, and I decided to prune it at the top, allowing for 2 shoots to form for this year, unlike the previous vine, which had already formed those 2 shoots the previous year. So those 2 shoots then developed very nicely by May 2nd. As you can see, there's good vigor in the vine and 2 shoots that are forming. But as the season progressed, it suffered from some potassium deficiency as well as boron deficiency, and it's never really fully recovered, and it continued to grow, but not too much more during the course of the year. So we'll have to see how this vine does in the following year. But if you look at the trunk, you can see that the trunk is a bit thicker and more developed than it was earlier in the season in May 2nd. So it has been storing energy into the vine, and I expect it to be more vigorous by next year. The next vine is Grape Vine R4-2, and in the beginning of the season it had a bit of a weaker vine, and it had 2 shoots coming off of it, neither of which had grown to the top of the stake. So it was showing less vigor than the previous vine. And I decided to prune it. As you can see where the red arrow is, that was the place that I pruned it, and I removed the secondary shoot that was coming up that could have potentially been a trunk. I picked this particular spot because I wanted to train this vine up and make it a straight trunk up the post. And we can see by May 2nd that this was growing very vigorously. And by November 2nd, it had continued to grow, but not quite as vigorously as it did in the early season. Again, also showing some potassium deficiency symptoms here. Although we are late in the fall and the vine is definitely slowing down by this point, there's very little growth going on in the vineyard by November. And we can see that we just have 1 shoot that I did not prune this one off at the top and allow for more development of 2 shoots. I'm choosing to wait till next season to do that at the beginning of the season, much like the previous vine, the Grape Vine R3-1. So finally, the last vine was a broken vine that I had snapped off the previous season, Grape Vine L5-1. I originally called it in the first video L5-4, but I've decided to rename it because it's starting close to the wall, and I'm calling all the vines close to the wall starting with -1 instead of a -4. It was easier to keep track. And at March 17th, we can see what the vine looked like. I had reattached it with wax the previous season after I'd broken it off almost completely. And so I was hoping it would grow back together, and it started to show signs of that with bud break and 2 stems that came off. And in this vine, my strategy was not to do anything to it over the course of the season and see how it developed. And by May 2nd, we see some good growth occurring in multiple shoots that are coming off the vine. And I just continued to train one of those shoots and let the other ones sort of sprawl. And you can see this in November 6th, where that shoot continued to develop to form a trunk. I just let it continue to grow. And you can see at the tip of this vine, there are missing leaves. Unfortunately, this was one of the vines that the hornworms attacked in my vineyard. Of 3 vines, this one was attacked. And so it was damaged a little bit, but I don't think it's seriously injured by the hornworm. I got to it before it took too many leaves. And so next year, I will prune off the lateral shoots that are going off to the side and prune it at the very top of the post to allow for 2 shoots to develop for next year. So in summary, we followed 4 different vines with different vigors and pruning strategies over the season. Those vines continued to develop and grow at their previous vigor levels. All the vines grew and developed, but each are at different developmental stages and require different management strategies for this and next season. Well, that's it. I hope you liked this video. If you like this video, then like it on my YouTube channel and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel to see more videos like this one. Have a great day.